The creators of this microphone made 300 prototypes of the capsule before landing on the Goldilocks tone. And also I discovered that cryo-freezing your components really supercharges them and makes them so much better. But let's talk about it. This is the Vanguard V4, back for a second chance.
From the mind of Mark Yoshimoto Nemkov.
So I had an awesome conversation with Derek, the CEO of Vanguard, and he wanted to enlighten me on a few things that I had gotten wrong in my previous video and a few things that I didn't know. And one of the things that I didn't know was, the capsule, the process in landing on this proprietary capsule of theirs. This is not a generic capsule. When I looked at it, I wasn't sure. I didn't know. I thought that was, okay, just an off-the-shelf capsule given the initial price of the microphone. So the Vanguard V1, again, came out and sold for like $399, and I figured, anybody who's selling a mic in that range really is probably not putting a very heavily developed capsule in it. But it turns out 300, give or take, Derek said, prototypes in about a decade to get it tuned right, to get it tuned where they wanted it. And it's pretty exceptional. I think the last time we looked at it, the big takeaway was that the capsule in here was definitely not generic and pretty special. But I didn't realize how special it was. Because Derek's partner, Ken, I think basically what I heard was really Ken's passion was getting this capsule right. And, a lot of blood, sweat, tears, and time went into it. And it reminds me of that great Thomas Edison story, right? How Thomas Edison invents the light bulb. And at some point, some reporter asks him, he says, you say it took 2,000 attempts to create the light bulb. So do you feel like you failed 2,000 times to create the light bulb? And Thomas Edison says, no, I believe I succeeded in learning 2,000 ways not to make a light bulb, right? So I think that that's amazing because you whittle down on the process. Because this is incredible. When you think about it, right? Art is never quite finished. It's only abandoned. And so to whittle down on the process over and over and over again, and you got to figure, I don't know if I would have the patience to go through 300 iterations of a capsule to get that sound that I'm looking for, that I hear in my head, and trying to drill down and get to it, and really working with the people to, change the design of the capsule and all kinds of stuff. I don't want to talk about anything proprietary, of course. But that level of detail, that's special. I mean, that's like kind of the process I feel like Neumann did, right? I mean, they must have gone through hundreds of capsules to get to their iconic K67. And this capsule, and this is a story that I feel like Vanguard really, really should tell because it's so fascinating to me. It speaks of the dedication to make this mic really special. The other thing I didn't know was that the cost of the components inside of a microphone, right, generally are the least expensive part of the microphone. And a lot of times you look at the capacitors in a microphone, especially that cheapy rip-off version, the Mavis thing, and you look at all the components on the board. And they're all like really cheapy. They're like the kind of resistors that they're buying, the factory's buying for 1/10 of a penny each. But the resistors in this mic, there are resistors in here that cost like a lot more than that. There are resistors that cost like 50 cents in there, which is a lot for a single resistor. There are capacitors that cost like $8. There's like $30 in electrolytics or something like that. There's a significant amount of money in components, premium quality components. So that speaks to, again, the overall quality of it, the quietness of it. And when you look at it, again, as the sum of its parts, it's not just a transformerless microphone, but it's a really high-quality one. And here's the other thing. This one really blows my mind because admittedly, I was wrong, all right? I was wrong about this microphone, and I am willing to accept that I was completely wrong. And to Derek's credit, he did not come over to my house and punch me in the face. But we were both glad to have this conversation because one of the questions I had was, come on, cryo freezing? Because they talk about the cryogenic freezing of their components, right? Cryogenic freezing of components. And to me, I'm looking at that and I'm like, that's marketing bullshit. But it's not. So this is cool because so apparently in aircraft manufacturing, cryo freezing components is a real thing. And I looked it up and this is totally true. And so they had an engineer friend who told them all about the cryo freezing of the airline components. And so what that does, what cryo freezing does, and when I say cryo freezing, right, you're taking these components and you are basically slowly putting them into a chamber. Well, you're putting them in a chamber that slowly takes them down way below 0 degrees, right? Extremely cold, and then brings them back up out of that temperature slowly. And the cryofreezing process, I did not know this. I'm like, what does that actually do? Apparently, it realigns the molecules inside of the components. And I'm like, okay, wait a second. This is starting to make sense because if it realigns them to where they're supposed to naturally be out of their state of chaos, what you get, well, this was explained to me by Derek, is what you get is you get much less resistance from components that should not have resistance in them, like capacitors, like your FET, right? So resistors are supposed to have resistance in them. But other components naturally, because of the nature of manufacturing components and really the tolerance value of within spec of these components, right? When you put a capacitor in a mic, a lot of times the capacitors you buy, a lot of times the ones you see in microphones, the spec on those capacitors, right? Really, there could be a variance of up to 20% off spec, right? So if you have, so think about that for a second. If you have an entire microphone, right? And the microphone is designed on paper, a circuit is designed on paper to sound a certain way. But in real life, the components themselves are not completely 100% accurate to what they're supposed to be, right? A 500 ohm resistor may be 499 or 498, depending upon the tolerance. If there is a 10% tolerance on your 500 ohm resistor, it could be 450 or it could be 550. So throughout the entirety of a circuit, this kind of changes what you are intending to do. It's not exactly what you designed it to be, right? So what cryofreezing does is it makes them more stable. They last longer, right? So they have longer life, they have better, not just durability, right? And of course, that's very important with avionics and airlines. And in airlines, they do it with the parts, like landing gear parts, and again, like electronics. So it makes everything more stable electronically. So it lasts longer, it performs better, it performs to spec. And of course, you have to figure if this is something they're doing in aviation, it's something that probably started with the military, which is why when you look at parts like mil-spec, military spec parts are always of higher grade and quality and cost more. So they're using the highest quality components to begin with, and then they're cryofreezing them to basically lock them into their state of where they're supposed to be, right? Eliminating that drift. So again, these are processes that are not cheap to do. These are processes that nobody else is doing. Nobody else is talking about cryo-freezing their stuff. Nobody, right? That's incredible. So when you really look at the sum of its parts, I mean, this is really a pretty incredible mic. And so when we were talking about, I had kind of harshed on Vanguard about the price change from the V1, the V4 V1, to the V4 V2. Mark 1, Mark 2, right? V1, V4, you know what I mean. The second version, the sequel. And what Derek said is they decided that they were going to go away from basically a lot of the physical components of the body were basically kind of off the shelf. So they went from kind of an off-the-shelf chassis to really a custom designed one. And the intent of that is, of course, to make the microphone better. And, he talks about the cost of working with stainless steel. Now, stainless steel, of course, is very durable, right? And basically, as a hardened metal, it's harder to work with, so it's more expensive to shape and cut. So the added expenses of designing a better microphone, coinciding with the disaster of supply chain collapse around the world. And of course, the cost of transportation around the world. During the pandemic, it used to be that you could get a container, right? A container boat, a container ship full of, containers. You could get a container on a container ship for a lot cheaper than today. And then during the pandemic, because stuff had to be shipped really quickly from China, especially like masks and ventilators and, a lot of high priority stuff, a lot of consumer goods got bumped. I mean, I think you remember there were times when you couldn't find stuff you were looking for, and a lot of that had to do with supply chain issues and transportation issues, and the cost of renting a container from China or Asia to come and drop it off in the port of Los Angeles or in the port of Baltimore somewhere. And overall, the cost of everything went up. And so that forced them to raise the price of the mic to where it is now. And the question always becomes, is it worth it? Is it worth it? And my initial reaction was, I thought, as a generic microphone, there's nothing special about it. I completely got it wrong. What has gone into this mic? While it is very kind of, has a nice, beautiful color, but otherwise it looks kind of like a generic microphone. There are a lot of very generic, cheapy microphones that look like that. The Mavis, that piece of Mavis thing, that looks close enough, right? From 50 feet away, you may not be able to tell the difference. But from this close, I can definitely tell the difference. I mean, so the question is, are you willing to invest in a high-quality mic that will probably last you forever, the way these things are built, right? And I mean, there's a lot of considerations here that I kind of glossed over last time. And, the thing is, when you look around for microphone information, there's not a whole lot of it coming from diverse sources. When you look at it, right, there is kind of a whisper down the lane quality to a lot of the information, and I like doing air quotes. The air quote information that you get online is often tainted by the fact that there are certain things that are quoted by other people that aren't necessarily accurate. There are certain statements that are made about microphones that somehow get accepted to be fact rather than lore. So, when somebody talks about, the capsule is coming from this factory or that factory or this or that or the other thing, there's no way to verify it other than you look around on another part of the forum. And Gearspace, I'm looking at you because Gearspace, you are the worst offender of this. You are the worst echo chamber of misinformation of gear. You are mind poison. And if you want to know what my true feelings are of gear, here, I'm going to point to the corner. I'm going to put like a thing there. You can find it. My true feelings about Gearspace. But, that's the problem, is that, and I don't want to blame the marketing departments of boutique mic companies, because boutique mic companies have enough issues on their own trying to get their stuff out there and really telling their brand story and what is special about their mics. Should be job one. And not just the stupid specs on stuff. Too many of you are just so focused on specs, on numbers, on paper, on graphs. And the thing is, the frequency chart graphs are often fudged by other manufacturers. They're often smoothed and fudged until they really make no sense. And capsules will vary a little bit from one to the other. And if you can get consistency in your capsule and you get it voiced right, then you get something like this. So is this microphone a premium microphone? I don't know if it's a premium microphone, but it's sure built with premium microphone principles. I mean, does it sound like a premium microphone? It sounds pretty darn good to me. Trying to compare it to a microphone that really the only criteria of the Mavis was, is this a good donor mic, right? Could you make something out of it that is that you would use, right? Could you make something out of it if you're into just Frankensteining mics together, right? Could you do that? You can. But I think here, right, what you're getting is something that is going to last you a lifetime. This thing is totally, and look, everybody says these things are built like a tank. They are. It's totally built like a tank. And, now that I know more about it, I definitely have more respect, not just for Vanguard, not just for the process that went into it, not just for, Derek and Ken, who is unfortunately no longer with us, but for the fact that this microphone is pretty awesome. And I think that I'd overlooked this microphone because I'd underestimated it, and that is on me. The Vanguard V4. It really is a special mic. I just couldn't wrap my head around. I just couldn't figure it out until it was pointed out to me. And I'm very grateful that it was pointed out to me, because now I'm looking at this mic, and again, it's in a plainish wrapper, but it's like Superman when dressed as Clark Kent. So what do you think? The Vanguard V4. I know a lot of you have these, but for those of you who don't, what do you think of the V4? Is it yay or nay? All right, let me know in the comments. All right, until next time, this is Mark Yoshimoto Nemkov, fading to black.